Alrighty, welcome everybody to this session on the Safer Internet project. Today I'm going to be presenting on freelancing in cybersecurity, the expectations and reality. Before we get started, I'll mention if you would like to become a member of the Safer Internet project, hit the Become a Member channel. There's a list of all of the modules that are currently included, as well as the additional benefits, and the FAQ section now has a listing of exactly what a verified member is and gets as a benefit. So it's all very clear. If you need any help with becoming a member, or you want to talk about it a bit more, you're more than welcome to DM me. And the same goes for if you want any more information after this presentation on freelancing and cybersecurity, just send me a message. Okay, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about me, of course, some expectations, reality. Is the industry, I guess, of freelancing and the part of freelancing within this industry of cybersecurity, is it for you? What's required to start actually freelancing? Some freelancing services that you can offer to potential clients. Of course, setting goals and long-term strategies. There is also a little bit of bonus content at the end, so make sure you stick around for that. All right, all about me. I love talking about myself, but I'll try and keep this as short as possible. I'm a IT/security professional with just over 17 years of experience across various different technologies, different industries, and different specializations, including some in leadership roles. I was once a SOC lead for a government agency for about a year, filling in as a contract position, and it was a good job. It was a pretty sweet gig, and one of the sort of last, I guess, contract roles that I ever did. I've primarily worked in government contracting over the last especially 5 to 7 years, and have been building freelancing businesses to now. I don't know why two, but I'll get to that a little bit later, as well as some other technology-related startups. One was called AirDesker, which was an interesting play on co-working spaces, but I won't get into that. We're talking about freelancing today. It's important to mention, I think, different work values, and why this is important for freelancing is because this is what clients see from you when they talk to you, and when you're presented to them, and when you present yourself to potential clients. I think it's quite important to have integrity, to strive for excellence in the things that you do, to keep a mind of collaboration with other people, and I'll expand on all of this a little bit later, as well as to be as innovative as possible within your niche. A couple of goals and objectives that I have is, and this is very high level, but to give my clients the best possible service outcome, then to build on that success through word of mouth advertising. This is so that I can build without having to pay a huge amount of money for outreach or networking events, etc. To create innovative solutions that actually work and bring value to my client's business. This is something that I provide, and usually in the way of a system or project that's fit for need. So a good example of this is in the automation space, and this isn't specifically cybersecurity automations, but any automations. Building things like business process improvement is something that is tricky to get right, especially within a time frame and cost effective way, because you can go way over time with automations. You can spend days, months, years if you really want. And then to grow based off the successfully completed projects and services my clients ask me to work through. All right, so let's start talking a little bit about expectations when people think about freelancing or running their own sort of service provider business. I see a lot of the time people have an expectation that clients will just come to you because you're awesome or you have X amount of social following or things like that. Or on the other side is that you'll be so busy working on the job that you'll have to employ someone to help you with the massive amount of workload. I can't wait to hack and defend all the things yeehaw. This is sort of an expectation that the work is going to come to you. You're going to start smashing through invoices and making absolutely bulk cash. And I don't want to burst any bubbles, but I am going to. This is not actually the reality at all. The reality is that honestly, nobody will work as hard as you do on your own business, especially when you're freelancing and starting out as an individual and you grow to actually employ someone. That person will definitely never work as hard as you do or as hard as you maybe expect. It's because they don't own the business. As simply as that. Another thing, customers won't just find you. You could have the sexiest website out there. You could have the craziest social presence. You could have 60,000 plus followers on YouTube on a cybersecurity channel called DC CyberSec. But no one gives a shit. I will tell you right now, no one cares. The people that you're selling to, they don't care about your social following. And while it can help in some situations, overall, I'd say it's really not that big of a deal. It doesn't help to bring in the clients. Another reality point is that all businesses flow in waves. So every business that I've ever run has had ups and downs, and that's just the nature of business. And this is something that I think people really need to understand and expect, because going into something thinking that once you get, 5 to 10 clients and they're all good, who knows if there's some sort of financial crisis or if that business itself is actually just not doing that good, or maybe a competitor comes in and takes that business away from you. It's a possibility, and it's something that kind of needs to be expected before things really break down. And this comes into things like overspending and business planning and things like that. But it's worth noting that all businesses, no matter what the niche or service or industry is, they all have their own flows and waves. The last reality point that I think is absolutely worth mentioning here is that the things you think you will be doing a lot of become the minority of your actual workload. So, for example, in my other business, CyberSec, we do software development, cybersecurity, managed services, you name it. It's kind of like a service provider for everything. Now, the actual work, the technical work, is the smallest part of that job. The biggest part of that job is talking to people and essentially rubbing shoulders with people to talk about solutions that they could potentially have. And then doing the job, which is the easy part for me, doing the actual work is a part that I enjoy the most, obviously, because that's why I'm in this industry. I love doing this sort of work. But it's also the smallest part in comparison of time spent. I would say most of the time I spend is honestly talking to people to bring them solutions on what they might need or that I think can help improve their business. So let's get to the point of, is this for you? Is freelancing something that you want to get into? Is it something to consider? Is it maybe you're just here to hear my thoughts on freelancing or starting your own business? There's a couple of benefits like creative control, independence, the experience / vibe, and the money if you're successful. There's also that really good feeling that if you've done something good for a client that makes them want to come back to you again in the future, that is honestly the best feeling ever. When you've provided something for someone and they come back and they come back again and again, they keep saying, thank you, you're awesome. And, being told that you're great is always a good feeling. So there are benefits of running solo. There is obviously benefits to freelancing. And if you're successful, there is monetary benefits as well. But going back to the reality of things, it can be very hard to get going. So why would you start a cybersecurity consultancy or freelancing business? The main point I have here next to this awesome hacker in the background is helping to protect and strengthen the networks people, governments, and business use on a daily basis is important to the continuity of society. And it's cool. It's super cool. I think it's super cool. And I think that passion is something that really brings in the clients when I talk to them. And this is something that I think is quite important. As I was saying before, a lot of the time when you're doing outreach and trying to bring in clients and working on getting the work in so that you can actually do the cool stuff is that passion. And it's a similar sort of situation when you're in a job interview and so people are they're interviewing you. It's a standard set of questions, explain DNS, all the standard questions that you see in any tech interview. And it's important to get away from that monotony and really inject some passion because they're going to remember that. And it's the same in an interview. It's the same when you're talking to a client because that is essentially just another type of interview, more based off a relationship than anything else. But it is absolutely something important that I believe is worth having. Just for anyone who's in the chat wondering if this is being recorded, yes, it is being recorded, and it will be available for the members on the website shortly afterwards. So let's talk some statistics. Let's do some numbers, some really basic numbers. It's absolutely worth noting that 20% of small businesses and freelancing hustles will fail within the first year. Don't become a statistic and work towards your goals. And I'm going to outline some goals and strategies for setting goals in a second. But the statistic I didn't add in here is that an additional 20 to 30% fail within the second year. The first year is obviously a very hard piece. The second year is even harder because you've been grinding for a year, and without setting the right sort of goals to achieve, you're actually potentially falling behind in that second year and then just giving up and going, no, this is not worth it. This is no good, etc., etc. And that's just a typical outcome of not having goals set or really not pushing hard enough on yourself. And this is what I'll get into in a moment. So what's required when you want to become a freelancer or go out on your own? Just like John Wick, you need to have a strong will and determination. You really need to push yourself to do better. You need to actually try super hard to be the best, to wake up every day and say, I'm going to absolutely smash this. I'm going to do this and this and this. And you achieve these small goals that build into bigger goals and achievements. And I'll get into the goals and achievement in a second. It's a huge part of this presentation, but it's so damn important because that's really how you grow any type of business. You also need to actually have some real work experience to show your potential clients. And this is the part of the presentation that a lot of people drop off on because a lot of people want to get into freelancing or having their own business without much or any experience. I had my first ever business was a computer shop, and I didn't have much experience. I had 2 years of working at another computer shop and doing on-site computer repairs. So I had 2 years of experience, which was a bit, but it didn't really prepare me for what the real world of business ownership is like. I can tell you that I'm glad I took the risk now. But at the time, it was a very stressful piece of my life because I really didn't know what I'd gotten myself into. And without that sort of will, the strong will and determination that I was saying before, that business would have absolutely sunk. I had to, like, you get up every day and you go to work, but you work for yourself. But really, what you're working for is not yourself, but your clients. So that's just a small piece that I think is worth noting. And if you're taking any notes from this is the absolute most important part, is that working for yourself is a myth when actually you're working for your clients, multiple clients. It's also good to have some money to start and live on while building that future success. So if you do have an opportunity to start a business and you're thinking about it and you have some spare money to live on while you sort of get things going, because it does take a little while to get those first few clients that are going to pay the bills, it's very useful to have some money. Otherwise, you might end up eating tuna sandwiches for a very, very long time, or 2-minute noodles, or whatever your preference is on super cheap food. It's really not easy, and I would definitely not recommend starting any type of business without some sort of monetary backup or a system where you are, not impacted to actually live your life. I think it's very important also to have a strong support network of friends, other business owners, family, people, and mentors essentially, who can help keep you accountable to actually get stuff done. It's a really hard time to work on your own initially because you are very alone. You go from if you're going from a workplace, a typical workplace situation where there's still people around, you can jump on Teams or Slack or whatever it is, and you can have a chat to someone that you work with and just talk shit for a bit, or talk about a client or some work or some stuff like that. And having a support network or a community, even if it's a Discord community or a LinkedIn community or whatever it is, of people that you can talk to and actually have conversations with, I think that is a very important part of business ownership and actually just staying sane. It's something that I absolutely need because I love talking. If you've never noticed before, I can talk for hours and hours. But I really need that sort of backup to talk with and bounce ideas off. And I know Colin's watching this and he listens to my rambles all the time, and I feel sorry for him, but it's part of a creative process that I think is very important to keep the ball bouncing. It's also very important to actually sell services that your clients want and not always what you want to provide. This is a very important piece in cybersecurity because a lot of people do come to me when they're thinking of starting a freelancing business, and I ask, what service are you going to sell? And they have one very niche service that they want to sell. And while that's all good and lovely, that client probably doesn't need that service. And I'll get onto this in one of the next slides, but what services actually sell and what services I see making good money, like bread and butter money, the money that's going to keep the bills paid. So, as I said, cybersecurity freelancing services. These are the services that I have listed that are the easiest to sell, and, well, maybe not the easiest to sell, but the most sought after and the ones that can build additional revenue. So obviously the first one is pen testing. Pen testing you can sell as a package solution. You say, I'll sell you a pen test for X amount of money. You'll get a vulnerability report and all of this done. It'll either be passive or aggressive. You choose. Just let me know what the scope is. That's it's an easy once-off project that you can also schedule in to be either like a yearly occurrence or a every 6 months, whatever it is that the client requires or that you maybe think that they need. Off the back of pen testing, you can also sell incident response with some sort of agent installation. Now, there's any number of RMM type tools or even like EDR type tools that you can get alerts from to feed into some sort of SIEM. There's the Elastic one, if you really want to go down that alley. If there's requirements on that though, but I won't get into it too deeply. But if you have your own sort of infrastructure, Elastic is great. There's other ones like Datadog or Wazar, or if you're a millionaire, you can use Splunk. If there's also like Exabeam, there's heaps and heaps of SIEMs that you can feed information into. And while that's all well and good, this is an agent installation that you're going to have to put on the end of their machines or servers or services to then create alerts from. Now, the problem with incident response is that a lot of people don't understand the need here. And they'll think, the first thing they'll think is, this is, X amount of money. Am I going to actually need this? Like, do I really need to be alerted if someone's trying to hack this server? How often does that actually happen? And the answer is you don't really know until you have a look. But that's sort of like part of the selling process and the relationship that you need to build with that person to show them that it is maybe something that they need in their environment. A good way that I found to sell incident response of some sort of agent installation is to use an RMM tool with some sort of EDR built in that you can then feed alerts in and use as a full RMM tool. So you get access to the performance logs. If they have an issue, you can remote in through that software sometimes. It makes life a lot easier. The only problem with those sort of softwares is that often they're sold in bunches of, like, I think the minimum is sometimes 25. There's different ones out there like Atira, and there's a Kaseya/Datto one. There's LabTech, which is part of another whole massive group of RMM tools. But the point here is that you're going to actually be also selling off the back of that some help desk services. And that's why I wrote in here, yes, seriously, it's really hard to avoid. So as part of a cybersecurity service that you're selling to a client, especially if it's an incident response service, as a freelancer or a consulting agency or whatever it is that you want to call yourself, help desk is going to be something that's really hard to avoid, because once they get a feel for, like, oh, we've got this IT guy, because that's essentially what you would be to them, who looks after the security, but he also, jumps in and fixes a printer every now and then. And while that sounds really horribly cringe, if you're running a business and someone calls you up for a printer, it's money day, it's payday, because printers suck and no one likes printers. No one likes no one likes fixing printers. They're just a pain in the ass, but they're also really good for creating a little bit of additional revenue every now and then, especially in larger organizations where they have horrible setups that you can, of course, set up in a project to fix up, but it depends on what their needs are and if they want to spend the money on the project. But let me not get away from myself, because there is other services that you can provide aside from incident response, help desk, and pen testing. And the biggest one for me over the last couple of years has been automation for business process improvement. Now, it sounds fancy. It sounds super, super fancy. You think there's, Python scripts out the wazoo, and it's honestly not. It's nothing like that at all. The automation work that I mostly have done over the last probably 2 to 3 years has been within Microsoft Power Automate. It's a click and drag tool. It's super easy. It's kind of like Zapier or IFTTT, just Microsoft, but it does have a lot of functionality for automating business process improvement. The way I have sold this mostly when I go to a client who's usually some sort of managed service client of mine, and I'll go in and you go in and fix something for them, or you're installing an agent, or you're there physically in person. And when you're there, people talk to you. This is part of the relationship building stuff that I'm talking about here. And they'll say, "Oh, I'm so sick of." You talk to HR because they love having a chat, and they're also a lot of their processes are really easy to automate. But they'll say something like, "Oh, I'm really sick of filling in this form that then gets sent to IT, and then IT has to do this, and it takes like a week. I hate this process; it's so painful." And you can say, "Oh, man, actually, I could probably automate a lot of that, and make your job like really, really easy." And they're like, "Oh, really? How do you do that?" And you're like, "Oh, I'll whip up an example for you, and I'll show you." So there's a bit of time there where you have to build something for free, but you can build quite a few hours off some of these automations. So for example, if you're automating the process that I just talked about, that typical HR conversation of the onboarding process of a new employee, it's essentially really, really easy to set up a form that gets filled in and then triggers a bunch of tasks to be completed. It takes a lot of the work away from two different areas. So one would be HR and the other one would be IT. And the process is, if you're their managed service supplier, you're the one doing the IT work for them, making your process of creating or offboarding, like onboarding or offboarding users automatic, but still being able to bill for it, is beautiful. If you still want to bill for it, that is. You could always just take that out of your bill and charge a truckload of money for the automation and then just keep selling automations. Because I found a lot of the time, once people get a taste for automation work, they sort of dive into it deeper. But this is sort of taking it away from cybersecurity slightly. Another service that is quite lucrative and fairly easy for a technical person like yourselves is technical document writing. It's something that is often not done. If you go to an organization or any sort of business and you're like, "Oh, do you have any sort of like documentation or wikis on like how this switch was configured?" And they're like, what was what? And you're like, "Oh, okay, great, cool. There's no documentation." If you bill to write that documentation, which a lot of places are pretty happy for because it gives them an opportunity to learn about what they've got as well. So if you write that documentation in a way that literally anyone can understand it, that's a very powerful piece to the puzzle, because you're giving out information on their systems for them. And while it takes some control away from you as their IT provider, a lot of places don't really care. I went to this one business earlier this year, just before I went on this grand tour journey of mine. And this business has, I think, around 200 employees. They had a previous IT guy who had a bunch of servers and stuff and he was happy to sort of offload the business because he thought that these physical servers were going to stick around. But obviously I had some different plans because I hate physical anything. I'm a cloud person myself. So, and the business requirement was sort of they wanted to move away from less physical space and more remote working, which is another massive opportunity to move into. So when I was going through with that guy and some key business people, like the business owner and the some ops manager, I was like, "Oh, do I have some documentation on this or this or this?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't have it here, but I can get it to you." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean you don't have it here? Is it on their servers or not?" And he's like, "Oh," sort of danced around the point. And I found out later that he had absolutely no documentation on anything, and that was a very painful piece for me, because then I had to explain to the client that, look, I'm going to need to write documentation on all of these changes that I'm going to be making, as well as the ones that I'm not making, that I'm taking over. And it kind of made him look a bit bad to the client, and it kind of made me look like I actually cared about their business, because I do. So technical document writing is another piece that helps build relationships, but also helps build money, which I think is the ultimate goal here. So let's talk a little bit. We'll dive into setting goals and then go a little bit deeper dive into the goals here. Let me know, by the way, if you have any questions, please ask at the end, and I'll help answer those questions as best I can. So as I've said here, setting goals is extremely important when trying to obtain success. Using stepping stones as goals is a method that I use to get to the bigger picture without realizing what I've achieved until I look back on what has been completed. Now, I've got an example on the next page, and I'll sort of talk about how I set these goals in a sec, but it's something that you don't even realize that you're achieving goals when you have such micro goals, and then, leading all the way up to the super high level achievement goals. So how I set goals is by actually achieving them can be hard, but setting yourself achievable goals to even out your workload is actually super important, especially when first setting out. So I set myself daily goals, weekly goals, and monthly goals. The daily goals, and I'll just open my phone up to have a look at what some of my daily goals today were for, because I never stop working. So I had to fix some things in Notion. I had to change or apply for a different bank account for the Safer Internet project, because the current bank account, they don't offer business banking anymore, apparently. I had to change some of the Zapier integrations because Twitter has killed the API slightly. I had to write this presentation. There's just the goals for a casual Saturday of doing some work. So that's like a typical daily goals. Now the weekly goals are sort of a wrap up of the daily goals in a bundle. So, for example, the ultimate weekly goal for this week coming up is to have a fully set up business banking account on a different bank to what I'm currently using. To get to that weekly goal, I had to achieve the daily goal of applying for the bank account. Like, did you see where I'm sort of going here? You have to set small goals to achieve the medium goals, to then the monthly goal, or the potentially the yearly goal is to have a lower interest rate or a easier to access bank, or whatever the thing is that you're trying to achieve here. On the ultra long-term strategy, it's very important to think ahead, think far ahead. Think of yourself as a business owner working wherever you want to on mostly the projects you want to do. And I say mostly here with italics because, like I said, a lot of people don't expect that they're going to be fixing a printer, but I'll tell you what, I still fix printers. That's something I just never escape. I hate printers. They kill me. Then think of your short-term goals and how they led up to this end result, the far, far ahead. Usually my long-term strategy is upwards of a 2-year plan where in that time I need to achieve a certain amount of income, clients, and projects, as well as having grown as a business along the way with website updates, a minimum of how many monthly social posts I'm completing to keep the social media monster churning, and ultimately the additional services that I'm providing along the way as the industry expands and grows with me. So this is an important note here that in IT, as a general industry, things change all the time. So to think back like 2 years, think actually way back to when I first started my YouTube channel. And when thinking about AI, I was like, nah, never. It's impossible. 2 years or 3 years, however many years I've had that channel for, to now, where AI is, you can't escape it. It's you see posts about AI and automation and the keyword of the moment. And the same thing goes for way back when I started in IT and thinking about like cloud systems. And I was like, I don't know if this is actually going to take. It's a cool idea, but it's just someone else's computer. I don't know if the trust is there. Blah blah blah. Now I'm fully sold on cloud. I love cloud, and a lot of business owners like cloud as well. And subscription type models to get started with, rather than having to buy first of all, probably an old computer with a massive hard drive to store their files, to having a cloud server that you pay a subscription for, and over a year it probably costs, or over the lifetime of a physical system, it probably costs more than that system does. But the use there is the fast uptime that you can get it going in. So there's benefits to everything, and the point is that the industry changes very quickly, and it's important to keep up and to sort of stay ahead of that curve, and to keep riding the wave of technology changes as they sort of roll down on the beach, because that's sort of what you're selling. You're looking at new solutions all the time to provide to your clients. So getting into these, sorry, who was that?
Hello, see you can people. Thank you.
I'm just going to mute that person real quick. I'd love your conversation, but I'll just divert from it. So where's my presentation gone? Here it is. So high-level goals. So I have a few goals here outlined over from January to July. I skipped out on June because I just wanted to outline like 6 months, essentially, and it's more of the same. These are just example high-level goals, but essentially like each month, 2 to 3 clients, 30 plus social posts, helpful technical articles like blogs, essentially, to help bring people to your social presence, and to sort of keep you at the forefront of their mind, and to actually attend real life networking events. Now, attending events is probably the biggest hack for getting clients in. I'll talk about exactly how to get clients at the very end of this presentation though, so stick around for that. But having these technical articles as well is another point that can sort of bring in clients to you, based on that you're always in their face. So it's similar to getting a job and essentially just talking to everyone and being on everything, so that you're making as much noise as possible that people find it hard to forget about you without being too annoying. It's kind of an art in itself, but having those articles to trigger the SEO to find you. So for example, if you type in like cybersecurity professional Australia, I'll probably be on the first page of Google. I'm not sure. Someone can test that for me if you really like, but I assume I would be on the first or second page. The reason that that's important is because if you're providing a service as a business, you want to be able to be found if someone does actually search for you. Having those sort of technical articles helps provide context for what you're doing and how you're protecting their environment, especially in a cybersecurity space. So for example, if you post an article on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is a huge tool for businesses and probably the main one that I use to this day. But writing articles on LinkedIn is quite useful because it's going to, get you across a potentially viral network, although don't count on a technical article going viral, but it does help to bring people in and to help them understand what you're doing on their environment. So if you're working with clients and you have them on LinkedIn as connections, and you write an article about two-factor authentication on Office Microsoft 365, they're going to be like, oh, that's why we have two-factor authentication on our author. That's why he did that project to get MFA enrolled for everyone, and to remove the business owners from the super admin account, and all these. That's why he did that, because otherwise sometimes this happens. This article that he's talking about. So it's quite useful to have that sort of tool at your disposal. Now, talking strategies a little bit more, I've got 5 strategy points here, which are planning, competitiveness, analysis, execution, and growth. And I'll quickly go over each of these and how this works as a strategy over a long period of time. So the first one is planning. That's the beginning of it all. You need to plan for everything, and especially including failure. Not everything works. Not every type of technical article or social post or networking event, conversation, or technical solution that you come up with is going to be exactly what that client needs or actually what works for them. Staying competitive and learning from your competition about what's working for them, though, and that could actually work for you, is pretty powerful. I've learned a lot from competition on how they've done things, and you can see like metrics. You can see it online a lot of the time, how things have worked for someone else that you think, man, that could work for me as well. That's a solution I could give to my clients. And it's not like you're stealing their clients. It's more like you're building on a proven solution that already works. And if you can make that your own, that's a very powerful tool. On point number 3, analysis, to analyze where you're doing things well and where things are not going well, to later capitalize on those learnings. So this is exactly what I was saying about with the competition, is sort of learning from that to then build better things. That's very broad, I know, but it's quite important when you sort of think ahead of your long-term goals. Point number 4, execution, is to execute on your strengths that you learned from that analysis stage in the strategy. So actually acting on those learnings and putting them into place and seeing the success yourself, or potentially going back to an analysis where that didn't work. Maybe it's for reason X, Y, Z. Number 5, point growth, is to, once you find a working and proven track that works, to just rinse and repeat it, baby. You've learned what to do, how to stay competitive in an ever-changing market in a very fast-paced industry. Use all of these points in your strategy to grow. All right, some bonus content and a very happy smile is how to get the clients. And this is the real money shot of the presentation. So as I mentioned, LinkedIn is probably my most useful marketing tool or conversation starter, I guess, that I have with people. It's where I find different types of staff who work in different areas of businesses. It's where I talk to business owners quite often. It's sometimes where I DM someone after talking to them after a networking event and say, hey, would you like to meet up sometime for a coffee or a chat or an e-meeting or whatever it is, to just talk about your business and talk about my business, and we'll just have a little business to business chat. It'd be fun, a little one-on-one. LinkedIn is absolute money. It's where it's at. There's a new app that I just joined as a director of cybersecurity on that I thought was worth mentioning. I asked the CEO if I could talk about this because it hasn't quite launched yet, but it's almost there. And it's called human.co. And essentially that is what the service being sold on there is cybersecurity to freelancers. So on that website, you sign up as a freelancer and you need to prove credentials. And if you have clearance, you potentially need to discuss that clearance, not exactly the clearance IDs or anything like that, because some of that information is obviously confidential. But it's a very useful app coming up and about to help freelancers find clients. So my role mainly in there is to help bring in clients to that platform for them, and then to talk to freelancers to help them to get onto those contracts. So I will be quite literally helping the businesses choose which freelancers to go with for a certain type of project based on the skills and experience that they have. So if you want to sign up on that website as a freelancer, I would highly recommend it if you want to do freelancing. The third one here is Fiverr. And I hesitated at putting Fiverr in here at all because I absolutely hate Fiverr. But the reason I don't like it is because it's like a flea market of resources, and some people are really great, and there's no discounting that the skill of some people have. However, there's also a lot of rubbish on there, and don't expect to sort of get a decent amount of money for a service that you could normally provide for a much higher cost, because people go to Fiverr thinking that it's going to be a cheap service, because often it is a cheap service. So I put it on here because it's a way to get clients. You can get clients from there, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. The fourth point is friends and family, and this is a really great place to start with. And I know friends maybe don't, there's a thing in Australia called mates rates. And mates rates really should be where your mates pay you more. But in reality, mates rates is usually where you provide the service, whatever it is, for free, or at least a very discounted rate. And, some friends are, especially as you get older, friends are more willing to pay you for your time and service if you're a professional trying to make it out in that industry. And I think outlining to those friends, look, I can give you a couple of dollars off or something if you really want, because we've been mates forever. But I do need to be paid for my time because, I value my time. So I hope you do as well. And that can be a very hard conversation to have, but something worthwhile. Usually with family, a lot of my family anyway, when I've had different businesses, have been more than happy to pay and support me in my business venture. So I put family in there as well because of that reason exactly like that. Now, you'll be the first person to think of when something goes wrong and they need some help, or they want to talk about security, or maybe they work somewhere and they want someone to present on cybersecurity awareness training, for example. You might be the person that they think of first to actually provide that service. The last one on the list here is networking meetings. And this is a huge piece. And it's probably where I've made the most money out of, and the best relationships with business owners ever. Some of the people that I work with to this day that I met maybe 7 or 8 years ago have been from networking meetings that I went to. There's different types of networking meetings. There's some on meetup.com. There's others like BNI, which is Business Network Integrated or something like that. They have chapters around the world. There's other ones like KBN. There's all sorts of different names for different networking meetings. Now, often they require some sort of sign-up fee to be a member of that thing. It's usually, I think BNI is around 1,000 Australian dollars a year to be a member, and then you have to pay to go to each of the breakfast or lunch or dinner meetings as well. So you have to pay for the food as well. However, that might sound like a lot of money, but when you're selling a service like pen testing, for example, and you're you're doing a pen test over 3 APIs and 1 web app. There's a couple of grand in there for you. Like there's a couple of $1,000 waiting at the end of that one job. So if you are able to make a good relationship and sell your services to just one person in that group, then you've probably made your money back. And it's very beneficial for people in IT to join these sort of networking groups. The other kind of networking groups, and not so much business networking, but just general cybersecurity meetup groups, are also very good to get into, because sometimes other business owners who are going there who have built a business over, I don't know, like 20 years. I've met some people at those networking meetings, the cybersecurity ones, that have had businesses for like literally 20 years, where they are like, oh, I need a little bit of extra work done on this. And they're a security provider, MSP themselves, but they just don't have the resources to get the work done. And their clients have an expectation that the work is going to get done real quick, because that's an expectation that they've set earlier. So they're like, oh, I really need to outsource some of this work to you. Could you, potentially do that? And that's another great reason to go to these networking events. It's time consuming. It costs a bit of money to get into, and this is why I said you need some sort of money backup at the start to get yourself going, because getting running it does cost money, and staying afloat costs money. And if you're breaking into this sort of industry and this this line of work, you really need some money to back yourself up and keep things working. And having these networking events, friends and family, maybe Fiverr if you're really struggling, Human and LinkedIn all together is a super powerful tool to build on and find success from. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. I'm going to take questions now for the next, until there's no more questions left. Let me know what you think about this presentation, and thank you very much for watching. Start the applause for myself.
Thanks,
While
DC.
I'm waiting for some questions, if anyone has any. Sam Sunder says, your thoughts on full-time job 9 to 5 and freelancing at the same time? It's a good hustle, and I actually really like this model because it's something you can actually build on. The only problem is when you start getting clients who expect that they can call you at sort of any time during the day, that's where things get really tricky. Because you're actually at work and you're trying to take a call, and things can get very hard. I know over the last couple of years I was doing a contract role, and before I got into that contract role, I had a clause in my contract put in that says if I need to take a call for my own business, I'm going to take that call. And they signed off on it. They absolutely hated it because there was a couple of days where I was in the office and I would get like 5 or 6 calls back to back, and my phone was just going off its tits. It was ringing constantly. And they're like, are you actually going to do some work that, we're paying you for? And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm really efficient. Don't worry about it, mate. So it was really tricky to sort of balance like that. So I think it's a good hustle, but if you start getting a lot of calls, there's a period where you have to start thinking about, should I take this full time or should I sell off these clients to another managed service provider? Bernd has asked, how would you know when your skill set is sufficient enough to go on your own? That's a really good question. And the answer is, when do you feel that your skill set is sufficient enough? If you were to apply for a job right now, the job that you want to sell, and you were going to an interview, do you think that someone would employ you based off your current experience? And I know that sounds rough, and I know this was like imposter syndrome 101, but I think it's an important question to ask yourself. do you think you have the skills? And if you want to ask, if you want to tell me what skills you have in a DM after this, and you want me to tell you if I think you have enough skills to get out there and do this on your own, you're more than welcome to message me. I'm happy to give you that answer. Just, for everyone, don't expect it to be a happy answer because it might not be. There's another question that I just saw. Oh, it's from Rio. He says he's doing this at the moment. I think that's in regards to the phone calls while he's at work. If you don't have other commitments, it's all Gucci. Phones are hectic as hell sometimes too. Yeah, the problem is a lot of the time when you're working inside an organization, and it's not a service provider to multiple organizations, like you're working in there, it's quite hard. Like you're sitting at a desk, and even if you're working remotely, a lot of the remote teams, they ask you to jump on Teams calls throughout the day so you can have like an office experience. But, you're constantly on mute, and if you have your camera on, you're constantly on your phone taking calls. So, there's obviously strategies around that and being micromanaged by bosses as well. But it's a really hard struggle. So, yeah, I think it's worth outlining. Another question here, how early do you start designing systems to support your product delivery when you're running a solo shop? It's got to happen eventually, but is there a point where it's too early? I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because I love building systems. It's just so fun. It's almost like a hobby. So a lot of the time I build stuff, and this is sort of like part of my learning process as well, not really knowing what I'm going into with it and just sort of playing around and causing chaos and bouncing off the walls until I figure something out to see if it is actually going to be a solution that works. I don't think there's ever a time where it's too early. I think just go guns blazing on it and give it a best shot. Saeed says, what do you think about software as a service or software as a service cybersecurity? I kind of touched on that at the beginning with incident response with agent or endpoint protection installations, where you can build your own type of solution. So, for example, if you had an old server lying around, an old piece of server that you were happy to use, you run Elastic on there with the Elastic Security EDR or EDP piece installed onto it, and you wanted to sell that as a solution, you could potentially sell that. If you just want to get into selling of different tools, though, as like essentially a roaming salesman of cybersecurity tools, but you don't manage them yourself, or maybe you do manage them yourself, that's a tricky area to get into because you have to be really solid on your sales skills and it depends. Like everything, it really depends what the solution is that you're trying to sell. I would honestly, if you're just starting out, I would stick to the ones that I listed there of incident response, pen testing. I know they're the two opposite ends of the spectrum, but I'm sure you guys can do it. Automation, technical document writing, and potentially the help desk work in between. Like help desk work is still billable hours, and if you're charging $100 or $80 or whatever it is per hour, and you manage to get like 4 or 5 hours in a day, you're absolutely killing it. You're smashing it, and that's still money in the bank. It really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you did to make that sort of money as far as a service goes. So, yeah. Any other questions before I wrap up this session? And before I wrap it up, I'll mention again, if you guys would like to see more presentations just like this, the mental health workshops and of course the live pen testing sessions, please do head to the Become a Member channel and grab yourself a membership. It's there's an offer at the moment for referral as well. If you're currently a member, you want to refer someone else to the Safer Internet project, you can do that and you'll get a free one-on-one 1 hour coaching session with me as part of that referral bonus. If you're a new person who wants to sign up and you don't have anyone to refer, you can refer yourself and I'll still give you that one-on-one guidance session. Sam Sunder says with a question here, any advice you can provide on negotiations with cost and time? Yeah, I usually, it depends what the service is, but I often, for a pen test, I'll say around a month. It really depends how big the scope is of what you're doing, but around a month is give or take a pretty good amount of time to get something done. With automations and negotiating time on that, it's quite hard because a lot of those automations can blow up. So if you don't know how to build that solution from the get-go, you're going to be spending your own time outside of the quoted hours. So most of the very basic automations that I would, quote on range from anywhere between 8 and 16 hours for something as simple as like a form gets filled in, the results of the form go into a SharePoint list, and then that SharePoint list gets converted to a PDF or another automation reads off that list to create a user or apply some sort of permissions or set up that account, etc. So somewhere between 8 and 16 hours is usually a pretty good place to sit at. As far as cost goes, I mean, in Australia, it's usually somewhere between 80 to $160-ish per hour for a standard service fee. Really depends on, where you are in Australia and what services you're providing. Samaritan, my good friend here, says, maybe I missed it during the meeting, but I often hear people say stuff like, hey, I got my CH and 10 other nonsense certs. I usually reply, waste of money, just get 3, OSCP, OSWE, OSEP or OSED. What do you think about this? Personally, I don't think any other certs will give you any actual value when it comes to freelancing. Maybe CISSP, SANS, GIAC. If you're a millionaire and you want to get that. As far as freelancing goes, because this was a presentation around freelancing, unless you're applying for some sort of partnership with a vendor, it really doesn't matter what sort of certifications you have unless you want to boast them. The only ones I bother listing on my email signature on my managed service business is my OSCP and my CCMP. All the other collection of certifications that I've done over the years for whatever reasons, and usually it's the last few years, it's just been to sort of test out those certifications and see if they're any good or not. They're completely useless, like you said. Listing them to clients is like someone with a PhD and the Mari. What's that HR one called? The Mari Hero or something like whatever it is. I can't remember it because I'm not in that industry and it means nothing to me. So these clients who are potentially not inside the IT industry and employing you, they don't know what half these certifications are. And sure, they can Google them if they really want, but the ones they'll probably look at is if you have a degree or not in some sort of business thing. So I don't list my computer science degree because I just don't really want to, if I list every certification I have, they can just go to my LinkedIn and see what certs I have if they really, really want. But I don't have a single instance where anyone has asked me, do you have this certification? Because it's just not something anyone really asked for, except actually there has been one time I just thought of when another managed service provider was outsourcing some cybersecurity stuff, and they asked me if I had my OSCP, and I said yes, and I showed them the certificate number and stuff. Samaritan says, thank you, DC. Just one more thing. Having said this, would you agree that people shouldn't waste their money on these less popular certifications, perhaps instead just focus on OSCP and CISSP? In the coaching sessions that I do, I usually outline certifications based on knowledge, not so much certifications for getting certification's sake. So waste their money, that's subjective, and less popular. I don't know about less popular, but a lot of the certifications that I recommend are the ones that will help get a job. Based on that, they have good information in the certification itself, so something to actually learn, and one that passes the HR/hiring manager/recruiter test, the ones that they actually look for that those employers want or need for whatever vendor, partnership that they have. So it's like a case-by-case thing. I wouldn't just blank say to everyone that getting certifications of lesser regard is a waste of time and money. I think it really depends on the individual, what job they're trying to get, and where they are especially. There's a lot of factors that sort of come into it. I can see someone's typing another question, so I'll wait for this one. Oh, here it is. So, DC, do you know if there's a significant difference in value or benefit for pen testing roles getting the CPTS or OSCP? Honestly, no. So with pen testing, a lot of the time, the clients really don't ask. The only time where people will ask is if you're signing up for something like that human app that I was showing before. In that app, it does ask for you to list your certifications. And it's because specifically when I'm going through freelancer profiles, I want to see what people have to then recommend them to particular jobs. So if there's a pen testing role that's coming up that I think someone needs to be able to do, I'm going to be looking for the OSCP. If I can't find a single freelancer with an OSCP, I'm going to be looking for the next best thing. So it really depends on the role. But is there a difference in value or benefit for pen testing roles, the jobs themselves, getting CPTS or OSCP? The OSCP is always the winner in certifications for pen testers to get for job roles. But that's kind of aside from freelancing in cybersecurity. I can see Saeed is typing one more message, so I'll wait for that to come through unless you want to unmute yourself and ask me. Interesting question. Data analyst versus SOC analyst, which one's easier? Super subjective question. I know more data analysts than I do SOC analysts. And I don't know if that's just based off the places I've worked. But yeah, I don't know which one is easier per se. But again, that's sort of aside from freelancing and cybersecurity. So I'm going to wrap up this session here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. As I said before, if you're interested in more sessions just like this one, please do head to Become a Member. I'll put it in the chat. Click on that, head there, grab yourself a membership, have a look at the list of benefits that you get by becoming a member, and I'll hopefully see you in the next pen test session early next week. Catch you later, guys. Thanks so much for coming along.